Hello, this is Ruthie, and today I want to talk to you about how sometimes in life doing what is right feels yuck, and it is only when you look back that you realize, oh my goodness, I did something really pleasing to God. Wow, at the time I felt like an idiot. I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me when I was 13 years old. Now, my parents are quite hospitable, and when they had people coming round to visit them, my mother had a rule because she wanted us to be hospitable as well. She would take me and my siblings aside, and she really took the attitude with us. If adults come and visit our home, then your father and I have guests. But if the adults bring their children with them, I do not have guests who are children. You have guests. Make sure that they are happy and they get everything they need. So it's fine. We're always expected to make an effort to host the children, make sure they were happy. And this particular day, a friend of my mother's brought a couple of friends she'd made to our house for lunch. So, of course, we had to take the kids and entertain them. So we went down. It was like a property with two buildings on it. There was like a guest cottage. We took them to the guest cottage because there was a big lounge there and we could play. And my mother and my father got to sit down with the mother and father of the children and hear about their progressive parenting system that they had developed. Now, this was a very unusual approach to raising children. But basically what the mother and father had decided was that if you want righteous, godly children, the way to get them is not by disciplining them or curbing any of their natural inclinations towards general nastiness and sin. Oh no. If you want righteous children, the gentleman and lady explained to my parents, what you need to do is you need to believe you already have perfectly righteous children, and your high expectations will bring them to lofty spiritual places of righteousness. And they used the example of lying. They said, now say, for instance, you want a child who tells the truth all the time. Most people would give their children a consequence if they found them lying. Yeah, like my parents. Oh boy. And by the way, God would tell my mother when we were lying. So in the end, we just gave up because God would be like, that kid is lying. So when your mother's running around with her ear tuned to heaven, it just saves trouble to grow up good. She was a scary lady, still very formidable in her own way because she's so connected to God. But anyway, they said, you must not give your child any negative consequences for lying. No, indeed. What you must do is you must simply scratch from your mind the belief that your child could ever even lie to you. No, simply treat everything your child says as absolute truth, and in the end, your child will want to become a truth teller. And my parents were like, oh, wow, that's a very unusual way of raising your children. My parents are incredibly polite people, and then they said, you want your children to be kind. Well, you can use similar approach and whatnot, and well, basically they just went on and explained how if you want righteous children, you just have to treat them like they are righteous, and they will become righteous. Well, my parents got to sit in the cottage up the path and eat delicious chocolate Tim Tams and drink large cups brimming with frothy coffee. Guess what I got to do? I got to entertain the children whose parents didn't believe in disciplining them for any misdemeanors whatsoever. Oh, I was foul. I didn't find them to be particularly saintly. They were very unique. They sat on the floor and they refused to play any of the games we got out for them. They told us very rude things about ourselves. Maybe the parental guidance included not training people to be sensitive, I don't know. I remember one of the girls playing the piano by punching it with her fists, which my mother always said that a very insensitive person can be picked by bashing up and down on the keys of a piano. She said that is a very wrong thing to do. Musical instruments should be treated with respect. Anyway, this was all going dreadfully, and they didn't want to play any of our games. They didn't like our suggestions, and they told us. And by the way, Adam and Diana, I just want to say you are such beautiful kids. I could never imagine you doing that. You're lovely kids to entertain. But that is because your parents are like mine, and they give you little consequences when you're not very nice. They don't take this progressive approach to parenting you. Anyway, in the end, one of the girls said, let's play Rotten Bananas. Now, Rotten Bananas is a game that, after this event in my life, I have come to view with great suspicion. At the time, I did not know how unpleasant the game Rotten Bananas could make my life. Rotten Bananas, and you've probably played it in the schoolyard, is the game where, regardless of what someone asks you, you have to answer with the words rotten bananas. So people say, what's your favourite food? And you say rotten bananas. And they say, what's your favourite breakfast juice? And you say rotten bananas, etc., etc. They might say, what's your favourite thing to wear on your head? And you say rotten bananas. What's your favourite shampoo? You sort of get the gist of it. So we thought, thank goodness there's a game these unique children will actually play with us. So we sat around, because as I say, parents expected us to entertain any children that came onto the property. So we started playing Rotten Bananas. And here's the normal questions about cereal and juice and clothes and whatnot. And then one of the little girls looked at me and said, and she was about my age, so it's not like what I did to a small child. She would have been about 13, maybe older. She looked at me and she said, what do you think of God? And I was so angry. I had been controlling myself. I had let them make fun of our house. I had let them make fun of our clothes. I had let them make fun of our food and of the games we were trying to play. I had taken so much from those kids. But when she looked at me and said, what do you think of God? Trying to get me to say I thought rotten bananas of God, I was so angry. I absolutely exploded, and I said to her, and these would have been words I used because even back then I had quite a large vocabulary, I said, under no circumstances whatsoever will I ever say that about God. He is the king of this family, and we do not include him in our stupid little games because he is the most important thing in our whole lives. Well, guess what she did? She said, Daddy! And went screaming up the path to her father and told her father, well, I imagine she told her father a whole lot of lies because, and he would, of course, accepted them as truth because he was pursuing his policy of believe everything you're told by your daughter so she will become a truth teller. And then he began to scream at my father, and my father's very calm and would never scream back. My father came down and said, what happened? And I explained it to him, and he said, well, you were right not to say that God is rotten bananas, but, you know, you could apologise for how you said it. You did say that rather forcefully. So it might help. It might help make peace in the situation. So I want to clarify, by no means did my father think I'd done the wrong thing. He was totally supportive. It was just these girls were up there screaming and yelling at their father, and their mother was weeping hysterically, and he was screaming and yelling about how his children had been so insulted and he couldn't believe it. So I went to one of those girls and I said, I'm sorry for how I said it. And she said, I don't want to talk to you right at the moment. Okay, I did try to obey my father. And they got into their minivan. I can still hear the mother crying and weeping hysterically, and the father yelling his head off, and the girls all screaming in the back seat just because I had refused to say that God was rotten bananas. And I felt really yuck. I felt really, really terrible. I was only 13 years old. I felt like I'd been very rude. I'd disgraced the family. I'd been insulting, even though my parents said, no, actually, once they were gone and off the property, my parents took me aside and said, no, really, we're very proud of you, and you're absolutely right. And the truth is, those kids are really, really unpleasant children because their parents don't love them enough to discipline them. And they said, that's actually why we discipline you, so you won't turn out like that. If you want to know the truth from your parents sometimes, just wait till everyone else is out of the house, because it's not exactly lying, but in families we have how we behave for people outside the family, and then we have what we'll actually tell the people inside the family. It's not lying, it just means there are some things we don't trust other people to say in front. We don't trust them enough to say things in front of them. And certainly it wouldn't have helped the situation at all to point out to this man that his children were not holy, righteous children. They were liars, they were unkind, and they were trying to bring disgrace on the name of God. He wouldn't have listened to it, because the truth is, to even come up with a foolish system of parenting like that, he had some problems of his own. But we're not discussing that. We're discussing the fact that at 13 I felt terrible. I felt really awful. But you know something? I woke up in the middle of the night last week, and I hadn't thought about that. And I'm 27 now, and I felt really, really good. I felt wonderful, because I realised I did the right thing. And I realised that I'm glad I did that. I'm glad for every single thing I did, and actually I'm quite glad that I was so forceful in my assertion that we would not be calling God rotten bananas, because it was the right thing to do. Now, I'm not saying we go around screaming and yelling, and I wasn't actually screaming and yelling. I got very impassioned. They did the screaming and yelling, but I certainly didn't say it in a weak, wimpy way. I said it quite firmly. And I want you to understand that in life you may have to make decisions that at the time you feel awful. But if they are the right decisions and you make them in a spirit of loyalty and obedience to God, give it time, lots of time, 14 years even, and you're going to feel really good about that decision, because it is hard in the moment to know what the right decision is. We can't go off our feelings. We have to trust our gut. We have to trust that little piece of God on the inside that tells us what to do. I want to tell you that it's good to be polite, and you should be. But if you feel that someone is messing with God's honour, and they're trying to get you to mess with God's honour as well, because she wasn't just saying that she thought God was rotten bananas. Oh no, she wanted me to say it as well. You are perfectly at liberty to stand up and say, no, this is my line and I will not cross it. And even though at the time you might get into a lot of trouble for that, if you're being loyal to God, I promise you, eventually you'll be very, very proud of yourself. Love you lots.